you are in the process. I want to thank you all who did participate in those polls for giving us that additional information. Looks like most of us are Canvas admins. One is unknown, and most of us are piloting Canvas, but we have one that is also soon to be live. Awesome, that's great to hear. So soon to be live, let's hear some of your feedback throughout the session. Now, as we get into the session, I do want to point out that this is a discussion-based session, so I'm hoping that you are bringing some ideas to this, and I want to see what sort of feedback you can give us, some of your ideas that you have in place, and so on. So let's plan on being active in this session today. All right, I'm going to move to a shared screen, and once I get into the shared screen, we're going to start off with our introductions. I want to start out by introducing my colleague today, Mr. Woody Roper. Woody comes to the training team from the support team, so really some of these rollout items that we're going to be talking today, he's seen some of the fallout from that if people haven't planned correctly or gone through the process or have been innovative throughout the way, or he's actually seen it when people are really lackadaisical about it. What it means when people don't do the work and put in the work through the adoption and rollout, through the support side of things. He has really seen it all. He's a great asset to have in the chat area where he will be moderating this session. My name is Nicholas Demas. I've been with Canvas for 2.5 years, over 2.5 years now, and it's a pleasure to be talking to you about this rollout and adoption planning. I used to work for one of the state universities here in Utah. It's cloudy, overcast, Salt Lake City, Utah. In fact, it snowed out at Woody's place overnight. Welcome to May in the mountains. All right, let's move in and talk about our training today. Like I said, this is a discussion-based session, so I really hope for your feedback as we work through this. If not, we're going to have some painfully awkward pauses during while I wait for you to type or when I'm eliciting feedback. So again, please be active. All right, so let's talk about what we are going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about Canvas in your school. We'll be talking about and trying to get some of your ideas about what your vision for Canvas at your school is, and we'll talk about setting expectations. We'll also spend some time talking about Canvas for administrators, ways that you can work through Canvas to help improve communication, ways that you can use Canvas for professional development. We'll talk about using sub-accounts and permissions, something that's going to be carrying over a little bit from what you may have seen in organizing your account or organizing your Canvas account, which is another one of our admin trainings. And we'll talk a little bit about extracting data and what that means. So I'm going to say data and data interchangeably throughout this session. So as it comes to Canvas overall, what is your overall vision? What are your expectations for Canvas at your institution? What are some of your hopes, dreams, aspirations? What are some of your goals, ideas? And some of these are going to play out depending on the level of education that you might be teaching. By level, I mean, are you K-12? Are you higher ed? Are you corporate? In fact, why don't we ask that right now? Are you K-12, higher ed, or corporate? Just do K-12, higher ed, corporate, HE, higher ed works. All right, thank you. Go higher ed, higher ed, higher ed, and who's our last one? All right, cool. So we're going to have some different expectations based on that different levels of education, right? We might be expecting certain schools if we're K-12 to be working through the process, whereas we might expect more from higher ed, maybe specific departments or specific colleges, and different expectations within those areas. Now, that's going to lend itself to the sub-account structure in Canvas. And if you don't know what I mean by sub-account structure, then I do recommend taking that organizing your Canvas account session. I think one or two of you were in that yesterday afternoon, as we can talk about sub-accounts and sub-accounts components in those areas. All right, so related to how we have what we're looking for in these areas, let's say that it's good when you go through your rollout planning to have some expectations. Let me pause real quick and say this about this session overall. One point of information that we do get when it comes to some of the feedback. Some of you have been working with your implementation consultants, and as you've done so, a lot of this information today is going to be familiar based on what you've heard from your implementation consultants. So I want you to be prepared that that is the case for this session, and I want you to hopefully think of this as something that can be in addition to what you've talked about with your implementation consultant. All right, now with that having been said, let's talk about our expectations or think about expectations overall when it comes to our institution. And let's think about how we can use Canvas overall to facilitate communication. There are many ways in Canvas that you may have seen through our different sessions of what it means to be working through the communication pieces and communication components in Canvas, whether we're talking about announcements on the global level or within the courses, whether we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about sharing of files, building groups at the admin level, or even within our courses, whether or not we're developing courses for PD purposes or not. Let's think about expanding our use or ideas of using Canvas, but let's give ourselves realistic expectations and goals through this. So this leads us to our first discussion item. What is your vision for Canvas? What do you hope to get from Canvas? And think about this much broader than, oh, we want a great place for students to be working through class, which is, of course, what we want to see, but what are some of your larger expectations and aspirations for Canvas? Are you using Canvas so you can pull more relevant data? Are you using Canvas to help out with working through accreditation and building outcomes? In K-12, are you looking at how we can measure state and Common Core standards when it comes to Canvas overall? So what are your vision? What is your vision for Canvas? I'm going to pause for a moment and let you all supply some answers and some ideas. And if you just don't know yet, then I don't know is really fair at this point, but I want you to think about this, maybe set some ideas on into print. That's a fair one, Angela. Angela wrote functioning LMS than what you are currently using, and you're using this to hopefully save some time when it comes to some of the functionality. Great. All the above and simplifying and managing integrations. One-stop shop idea, right? Is it Rogine? Am I getting that correct? And Jessica, you're early. I think you said that yesterday that you are early. You consider classes moving more online and media focus and some of the tools and functionality that's going to be involved with that. All right, Jessica, hopefully yesterday will provide a decent backdrop for what we talk about today. And like I said, there's going to be a bit of an overlap with what we were seeing in the other sessions. All right, so great. I like that we have some of these ideas in place. Higher functioning LMS, better integration with tools, basically, if we're going to be summarizing this, and using more content for our online driven courses. Absolutely. And Campus is going to be a platform for that. And we can talk about different expectations, or you should at least think about different expectations when it comes to what uh, your online courses would see versus some of the face-to-face courses. You might be a little bit more content heavy in the online courses, content heavy within Canvas, that is. All right, and let's not limit it to this. Let's think about professional development. How can we use Canvas for professional development? How can we use it for that communication, as mentioned, and creating an online and collaborative space for your institution? All right, so related question, everybody, what expectations do you have to reach your vision for Canvas? What are some of the steps that you may be setting up along the way or that you've thought about, or for a couple of you, as you are in the later stages, what are some of the expectations that you set in order to lead to a much more successful rollout? I'm going to pause for just a minute and let you work through this question. Okay, Jessica, So staff training, Angela, great. We are people who are always trying to, yeah, push training as much as possible. Jessica, we like to actually get folks to understand the features and learn them from the start, not just relying on the old system, right? I'm chuckling because we run into that quite a bit. And, Rogine actually kind of echoes that. Coming from Moodle, we want to match functionality and exceed wherever possible. And that's one of those hard parts is making that connection between the old LMS and the new LMS. What does it mean when you are expanding your functionality? I mean, it's easy enough for somebody like Progene to say, hey, it's so much nicer that we are moving to a cloud-based platform and not doing some of the self-hosting. I think that comes along with Moodle, and it's just going to cut down on a lot of work from the IT side of things. That's not necessarily something that your instructors are going to be seeing because they're not working in those trenches from day to day like the IT folks are. And so, yeah, it becomes a little bit difficult to make that known to everybody. However, yeah, there is this kind of awkward collusion of what's going on. And so Jessica and Regine, when you're meshing that old LMS, people have some expectations on how things should work, and then they find that it works just a little bit differently in Canvas. And then there's the whole unknown part of it that comes into play, like what are these tools in Canvas that are added functionality to what we might see in our current LMS, whether it's Moodle or some other LMS, and how do we make that well known to people? So yes, spending some time yourselves to identify some of those features is absolutely important. So Angela wrote in addition, we have established a timeline. I love reading that. Great. And have some one-on-one training sessions scheduled at the end of the month. Great. Yeah, that one-on-one training time definitely benefits some of your learners. Not all of your learners, but some of your learners. It really depends on what sort of learners you might have. We at Instructure and as a training team, we kind of figure that there are about 4 different types of learners. And we talk a little bit more in our train the trainer session, what some of those learners aspects might be. Uh, and that's going to be playing into what or how we approach this. So I'm glad that you are doing the continuing training. I will say, and I said this yesterday, for those of you, I know Jessica may have been in the train the trainer session. I will say that keeping Canvas in front of people, the continued training is one of those most, is what we typically see as a training team and as a company, leading to the more successful adoptions and rollout. All right, and just to go back to that discussion about expectations, some of the expectations that we think about, you know, it's going to be changing depending on what you are looking at overall as an institution. Expectations might change if you're one-to-one, if you're pushing content online, or if you're trying to do things solely online, or if you are a BYOD driven institution. Now, I'm glad that we have established timeline, Angela, because when it comes to some of the more successful rollouts, we see that we see institutions who are more successful setting those expectations for their instructors and actually having well-defined expectations for instructors, but being realistic about that, setting different items, say for year 1, year 2, year 3. And we say that, the training team says that, and you'll hear it from the implementation consultant about how you, as Canvas admin, should be managing your overall system. We understand that different levels of technology will come into play and how you are interacting with the admin side of Canvas. And so we often tell people, Canvas admins, that really year 1, focus on learning how to use the admin side of Canvas. Learn about the different tools, different functionality, work through CSV uploads or SIS imports, and then move on to delving into information about APIs. If you already have an API whiz on your staff, then use that person or have that person learn more about the API components of Canvas so you can better automate the overall system. So these goals really for rollout also do apply to you, or setting goals do apply to you in the admin side of Canvas with some of those specialized roles and components of Canvas that you might be working from, as much so as they would apply to the coursework and the course side of Canvas. All right, so set those goals. Some examples of expectations that we try to set with our instructors that we work with, and that we'll obviously mention here, is that we'd like to see, or at least as a bare minimum, we should say that all teachers should deliver one of their courses completely in Canvas, whether it's happening through the pilot period, the pilot group that's working through it, or whether we are going through that initial rollout, as a couple of you are starting soon with that big rollout. making sure that these teachers do so at least one course in Canvas. It'd be ideal if all were doing it, especially in higher ed, where we want to see that students have a bit of a uniform experience. Let's not forget the student side of all of this. We might say that all courses will have a homepage and a syllabus in Canvas. That's a very easy but real expectation to set. All teachers must use the calendar and syllabus in Canvas. It's a very simple way to add events and add assignments. I would push beyond that and say one of my goals for everybody would be that everybody at least works through modules, even if it's a very limited module, so that you can expand on that if you are an instructor. And I hope everybody's taken the modules course, or at least has a decent understanding of what modules are in Canvas and why that might be important. Or a goal might be to have all quizzes being delivered through Canvas. That leads us to our next slide, which is to talk about some goals, some SMART goals. SMART is it's kind of a SMART acronym here. Yay, SMART acronym. So we're looking for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. Why would we want a specific goal for our instructors? Well, we want specific goals for our instructors so that they have legitimate expectations. This is something that's well defined, something that you can do. Going back to that list, that litany of expectations that I just talked about, saying that all courses must have a home page or a syllabus, that is a very specific goal that you will be able to hopefully measure. When we say measurable, what does that mean? Well, it's something that we can identify as happening. By the way, it's just started snowing. It's May 17th, and it's now snowing outside my window in Salt Lake City. It was 80 degrees 2 weeks ago, just 85 degrees a week ago. The mountains. All right, 85 today. Yeah, yeah, nice. We throw in the weather, and it gets excited. Ohio, I think Ohio, you have similar weather to us, don't you? Just wait 10 minutes to see what happens. Jessica sounds like she's in Texas. Well, I think our snowstorm is blowing your way. South Carolina. Oh yeah, yeah. So it's either hot or hotter. Yeah, exactly. Oh, Rogine. So it's cold and humid right before it's hot and humid. Love it, Jessica. All right, so let's go back. Specific, measurable. Measurable. We want to see something that can be measured, something that we can turn in. I've built a course. I use a course that I work with others during my on-sites where we build assignments in that Canvas course around specific Canvas features. A measurable goal would be to say, okay, send me a screenshot of your modules. What do they look like? I want to see what they look like. That can be an assignment in the Canvas course, and that is something that is measurable. Attainable. Attainable goal might be we want to make sure that it's a goal that somebody can actually reach. Meaning, we're not going to look at a first semester professor to have all 15 weeks of the semester thrown into as modules thrown into their Canvas course with all those all those module controls you can do, like lockouts, prerequisites, requirements, etc. within those, and every piece of content that they're going to need as part of the course. We don't really expect that for a year one professor. That's not to say that there isn't a segment of the population that's not going to do that. There will be a group who is going to do that. An unattainable goal for you as the Canvas admin side, we're not going to expect you to be doing some scripting and automation between, say, your APIs with Postman, so that you can auto update courses, or so that you can build out new sandbox accounts based on somebody submitting a Google form. But we do expect you, and an attainable piece would be for you to have a better understanding of your settings, to be focused on feature options, and to make sure that you're identifying at least let's say five different LTIs or apps that you might be using as an institution. And let's make sure that they are relevant. It's not going to do you a service to find those five LTIs that nobody's going to be using. You're adding components that are not going to be used across your institution. Likewise, for your instructors, it makes no sense to make sure that they are using all the assignment index page components, weighting their courses. If that's not something that they actually do, we're going to find a small segment of our user population that actually might be uh, doing weighted grading. Um, so that makes it a bit relevant. And then time bound. Yes, give everybody a due date. People and due dates make everyone nervous, but they are incredible for at least putting driving home the point that there are some expectations. All right, so do you have any SMART goals in place right now, or have you thought of any SMART goals based on what we've just talked about? Give us an idea in your chat area if you have any SMART goals that you thought of or that are already in practice or in place. So Angela, are you creating those videos? Or are you using some of the videos that are coming out of the Canvas community and Canvas guides? And by the way, I like that you're using videos to help staff along, providing them something that they can use. And those community videos are mostly good. Regine, I think that kind of echoes on what you've said before too, communicating timeline to faculty for migrating their courses. Ooh, so that one of the trainings might be around a specific piece is to migrate your courses, measurable because you can actually see that migration or showcase that migration, or at least provide those steps, and it's attainable because migrating is the overall process is pretty easy. It's just sometimes it's waiting to the minutia to find out all things are transferring over. The relevant part is pretty self-explanatory. You cut out some of the work by being able to do so, and then time bound. It's hopefully something that these instructors will do before course starts at the beginning of the semester. Excellent. I do appreciate the feedback when it comes to these SMART goals. All right, so this is going to lead to our next discussion piece. It's a little bit leading if you're looking at the titles. Now we're going to be talking a little bit more about Canvas for administrators. We've kind of peppered this discussion throughout with some ideas about how administrators can be setting goals for themselves through, say, API features, understanding account settings, maybe building user groups, maybe professional development ideas. But now we're kind of, first of all, we're going to think a little bit about communication and how communication might work for your staff and how you might be able to use Canvas to drive different ideas about communication. I understand that a lot of our institutions are going to rely on that institution assigned email, something that's going to be typically part of higher ed, but not necessarily, and maybe think about ways that you can augment that. So how can Canvas be used for communication with faculty and staff at your school? Faculty and staff. It's important that we include staff as part of this discussion. So what are some ways that you've uncovered, or what are some things that you've seen that you think, hey, this actually might work for us based on some of the other trainings or your experience? I'm going to go back on mute and let you work through some of through this discussion. What are some of your ideas? Yeah, the fun thing is about discussion-based sessions, right? It's earlier in the day, well, sort of, not for all of you, or maybe not all caffeinated, a little bit trying to work through some of these discussion components. So I do appreciate the efforts that everybody's put into it so far today. Your discussion has actually been phenomenal to this point. And I see some typing going on, so I'll go back on mute. Yeah, that is kind of fun, isn't it, Angela? Especially with some of those way you can set up your different notifications. About that, that's something that's worth working through. Regine, the notifications, going back to that, the notifications worth working through with your instructors and even your students. It's actually one of those common questions related to communication, Angela, related to communication notifications. It's one of those common pieces that we see that students, they want to learn how to work through the notifications a little bit better. Or Gene, you wrote an instructor resource site where they can participate in community discussions. Absolutely. I mean, we can build a course around setting up those discussions for our instructors. Um, Jessica, I create edtech videos. Great. You're kind of if I remember right from yesterday, you're a bit, aren't you a bit on an island doing a lot of this yourself on your campus, trying to get everybody involved? Okay, yeah. Jessica's wearing many hats. We all wear many hats, but Jessica seems like she's going through a lot of this alone. So this is fine. We can actually jump over into Canvas a little bit to work through this discussion area a little bit better. And I'm going to jump into the admin tab so that we can talk a little bit about those different components that are going to be helping facilitate communication. We've already discussed the calendar item. One thing that makes the calendar a little bit better for our users is to enroll our staff and our faculty into a professional development course, whether we're using that course to maintain updates, whether we're using that course so that we can add events and items to the calendar. I mean, we could use this for continuing education on Canvas, for supplying those videos that Jessica's talking about, and even those Canvas videos that others have talked about. Angela wrote about the Canvas community videos. So we can do that by building our own course. As I stated before, I actually built a professional development course that I worked through quite a bit with different schools. We're looking at sub-accounts right now. Our sub-accounts hours are super messy in Canvas. So I go through a professional development course that I enroll people in, and I try to include relevant information to the instructors in here. What does it mean to export? Here's one from Blackboard, exporting content from Blackboard, importing content from Blackboard, getting started checklist, what does that mean? And then building specific challenges to push that accountability. Now, this is easy to do as a professional development space, but what this does, if I invite all of my staff to this through people, it creates an area where I can use this for discussions. And if I build a discussion in one of these items, I might build a pinned discussion where I am going to have everybody talk about what this means to them, what these different ideas are, and have a general question area. So I can use a discussion component of this overall to serve as kind of a, how about a Canvas questions area? Uh, Post your questions about Canvas here. And then you can say, we're not even going to go through all that, and we'll just save and publish this. We'll make it a pinned discussion. It's something that everybody could use to ask those questions about Canvas. Put that as pinned as part of the course. Everybody will feel like they have this common space that they can work through everything. Now, another thing you could do, and I've done this in trainings before through a Canvas course, is you can create a collaboration that would work whether you're using Google Docs, Google Apps, or Office 365. Google Docs is kind of the in-house version, not in-house, but the old school version of creating a collaboration. It's Google Doc only. Google App adds a few more components, as does Office 365, which is not shown. But you can create a collaboration document for Canvas questions as well. And you can even embed one of these documents as part of your course. It's something that's a little bit easier to do if it's a Google App component. Now with this, you can collaborate with your instructors who are in this course as students, so they get a bit of a student experience, which really helps for that empathy on the student side of things, but also leads them to have a better work around with adding these questions to courses, adding relevant examples, and keeping this collaboration and keeping these ideas open and in front of people. In fact, it's not a bad idea to add a collaboration piece to one of our modules or even in a module itself. So what does this course do? Let's kind of summarize that. One, it gets everybody in here, my faculty and staff in as students, meaning they're going to be participants in this course. They're going to be able to have the communication through the course. They're going to be subject to the notifications that are set up in the account area. Two, it gives us, in a sense, as a university or a college, it gives us a better sense or better use of the calendar in a universal setting, meaning all these people in this course are going to have the calendar related to this course as such. They're going to have that course material. They'll have access to placing events, etc., as part of this course for everybody to use. And part of those smart goals, specific, measurable, attainable, time bound, and relevant. That's smatter. Sorry for smatter, but we can add those goals through these maybe different challenges that we set up. Orientation challenge, homepage challenge, where people will turn in assignments based on screenshots, and then maybe give points for revised screenshots. And if we can, maybe add some rewards to that. So that's a bit of an idea around a professional development course. Let's go back over to the admin side and let's talk about users. And we can use the space right here to set up user groups, whether we are doing a group that might be all of our staff at an institution, or we might be building out groups that are specific to departments at our institution. So we can build group sets, and then we can call ABC University, and maybe we are building groups around this. Department of History. Maybe we have a Department of English, and so on. And then we can add groups to these different areas. Abraham Lincoln could become a user in that group. Once you are part of a group, you'll have a group tab that opens up in the left-hand side in the global navigation menu. And that's provides a good workspace for those groups. Now, when we go into these groups in just a little bit more detail, if we jump into a group space, what we're seeing here is going to look similar to what students will see in their groups back at the course level. But these groups, something that we can bounce through, uh, these groups will give, say, that department or that college an area to work through common problems, or to work together to create outcomes, or work together to just share files. But also is a place where if we are setting some of those SMART goals, we can see that they're working to fulfill those SMART goals by maybe we can see that they're developing pages within these different areas so we can assess what sort of knowledge is at play. Or maybe we're using this to see how people might be sharing templates in this area. So let's say the English department creates a template. You know, it's not going to be that hard in that template space to copy some information over from the HTML editor and to use that as a department. What this does is creates a bit of a standardized experience and maybe fulfills that everybody must have a syllabus or a homepage option, because we had this English committee, this English group, or group A in this case, who have created a shared piece of content that they can take back to their courses and make some minor modifications in order to make that happen. So that really would be about you facilitating some of this group growth in this area. The final place that well, a couple other places I want to mention. We talked about a discussion back at that overall course that we might enroll people in for professional development capacity, which would also, we might want to consider separating that between your online group and your main group, just so that you can push out different experiences, maybe augment some of those challenges. But we can also use these spaces, whether that course or right here in a group space, for facilitating or adding discussions so that everybody can discuss these different platforms, different ideas. And these discussions will also lend themselves to having something in print, in writing, so that maybe the decisions as they are pushed out or shared can be tracked. One thing that I think everybody runs into a problem with when it comes to a professional development item, and professional development is placed that as part of our rollout, because essentially that is rollout is initial professional development. One thing that we see that will commonly happen with this is a repetition of ideas that have already been placed. And so if we are able to track those ideas and make them so that they are time bound and measurable, then hopefully we'll work towards some sort of progression on what's happening. I think we've all been in a situation before where we've had a staff meeting, we've made a decision, then a month later during the staff meeting, we revisit the same item, and then we go through and make the decision again that really should be nearly accomplished because we're talking about a month later, rather than something that we should be talking about and building a discussion around, or an idea around again. And since we're using Canvas as a means of communication, let's talk a little bit about settings, and we'll talk about a feature that I've come to appreciate, and that's the announcement option within this admin side. This is different than the course announcement. Course announcements will be to the course, Overall announcements, as you may have seen through our Canvas course settings or global settings session, we can build announcements that are going to affect specific people. We can add a title to our announcement. We can say what sort of an announcement type this is, and for professional development, for our staff, for our training, for our rollout, etc. And this might just be an information piece. Now, where this becomes good and helpful is we can determine who we want to send this to. You can send it to everybody in the account, which is not necessarily going to be the case, not necessarily something that we will want to do. We can do this by selecting specific course roles. So maybe we want to get our staff, so we're going to limit this to those people that might have staff roles. And even if that staff role is on the course side or the account side. We can also use this area to maybe just reach our different or other account admins. When you place an announcement, it shows up on the dashboard of the user. Now, one thing to consider with your rollout and adoption is that whole student facet of it. I mentioned a little bit earlier, but it's still important. Think about providing some supplemental information about Canvas based on adding it to an announcement. Here's a link on how to submit a paper using Turnitin. Here's a link on how to submit an assignment, which incidentally are two of our more searched items when it comes to how students are approaching the Canvas community and Canvas guides. To say that again, a little bit more succinctly, the Canvas guides in the Canvas community showcase or showing that students often research how to submit assignments and how to submit Turnitin assignments. We're talking top 10 routinely. So use this area to reach out, the announcements area, to reach out to specific people in your staff when it comes to how you are going to promote different things in Canvas. I just use that word promote. That brings in another idea, another thing. When it comes to promoting Canvas, there's a bit of marketing that hopefully takes place at your institution. Make things seem kind of exclusive if you're in the pilot period. And do some different ideas to push out different and relevant roles for your institution, and try to get it so that people are going to have a bit of buy-in overall to Canvas. So Rojin asked the question, what is the announcement maker role? Well, this is actually where we can move into this area right now. Right now, we'll move over to this area right now. Something that you might also consider in Canvas altogether, and we talk about this in organizing your account, maybe even being an everyday admin, but you can build specific roles in your instance. One role that we use and see commonly is that somebody might be an announcement maker. This is somebody who is typically an administrative assistant, maybe through a specific department or through a provost office or someplace on campus. It's an admin role with very limited permissions. So limited that what they do is they make global announcements. That's about it. Custom role. That's something that you all can do is build some custom roles for your institution. By default, you have an account admin role and you have specific course roles like student, teacher, TA, designer, and observer. But you can add additional roles to it as you see fit, add additional roles to Canvas as you see fit. And we recommend that as something that you, on the admin side, that you set as a goal for year one. So year one goal might be the first semester might be to identify some specific roles that you might like to see at your institution. And semester two would be to put those roles into place so that you can better facilitate or better use Canvas universally. Interestingly, some of those roles can also be built at the specific sub-accounts, and we can add admins at the sub-account levels. All right. So let's go to our next question. We kind of talked about this, but what are some different additional ideas that you might have about how you can use Canvas to deliver professional development and other faculty resources, whether you're using it as building a Canvas course around this and whatnot? What are some of your ideas when it comes to this? Go ahead and type some pieces in this chat area. Type your ideas. That's what I meant by pieces. Type your ideas in the chat area. Thank you, Jessica. Jessica wrote that she likes the group ideas for pushing out files to faculty and staff. You could also do so through notifications if that's going to be the case. Also, something you could add to professional development course. You do a monthly newsletter, which would be lends itself to that announcement of tech tips that can be used in archive. There, that's well, yeah, archiving it would make more sense to build it through that professional development area over all the announcement area. So I think that's fantastic. Also, again, modular training. We like the idea of maybe embedding a form to capture questions that could be absolutely, and that's something that I like to do. It's something I do on trainings, on-site trainings. I create a parking lot, so to speak, a shared document so that people can add their questions to the document. Then everybody can see the answers to the documents. Not everybody will see my follow-up emails to a training, so it makes sense to have a document around that. So Angela wrote, create a PD course, encourage involvement in groups within the Canvas community. Ooh, the Canvas community. Yes, Angela, fantastic. And little known fact is that you can even have private groups in the Canvas community. Something that you might want to set up for your users, for your institution, so they can go out to the Canvas community. Now, we at Instructure encourage people to use the Canvas community, but we also understand that there are time limitations, that our full-time job is to administer our university, make sure that Canvas is working and our LMS is working properly, and delivering content to our students. But it's nice if you can join the Canvas community because there is a wealth of information in the Canvas community that would be useful for continuing this education in our class. All right, and so yeah, let's just go back briefly to that group space. Remember, within groups, just as a quick review, we can build our announcements within our groups. We can have people develop pages within our groups. We can build discussions in those groups, maybe those pin discussions about different ideas. We can have the files in the groups, and we do have the collaborations in the groups, so the English department can work with each other in order to build out these different pieces when it comes to the content. And build out announcements, etc., to make these groups that much more relevant. Plus, they can work through these groups to map curriculum, work through instructional strategies, work through smartboard training, work through school improvement, share some accreditation ideas, maybe think about some outcomes that they might want to build for our department as that might work for accreditation as a longer term goals in the space. And if we need to work towards some different ideas about project-based learning and whatnot. And yeah, that file sharing is great here. All right, so let's jump over into this piece. So, out of curiosity, too, this might be not quite be that year one goal, but something that we're going to be using a little bit later on. But this certainly does make rollout that much easier, or the continued use of Canvas that much easier. In what ways can your school leverage other Canvas features like rubrics, analytics, and reports for faculty use? So go ahead and add some comments into the chat area on that one. Or if you haven't thought about it yet, that's fine. That's absolutely fine if you haven't thought about it yet. Just let us know. So Angela wrote that she likes to see how much time a student is engaged in online learning environment. It helps when a student does not pass to show reports of time spent. Exactly, and there are quite a bit of reports that hopefully you've seen, Angela, so far that will help showcase what's going on. You have some limited logging and reporting for academic dishonesty cases. Yep. So I can use similar tools in Canvas, IP log, student tracking, etc., to take a look at those items. Also, Jessica, you can add to that being able to masquerade as the student to see what sort of time they are spending in it, communication, where they are, what's happening, and so on. Woody will tell you, just as an aside, that they see not often, but on the support side of Canvas, they caught students trying to cheat more than once. So it's part of his experience. Shared resources, permission roles, data. These are going to be able to make this a little bit better an overall process for how things are going to be built out. And Rogine, yeah, when you go to the when let's say you build a file that's easy enough to build a Word document or a PDF that's going to encapsulate a rubric that can be built at a sub account or the root account level that can be shared by multiple people. Some of my ornate, air quote, ornate rubrics I built by copying and pasting content into the rubric, built it as a shared as a rubric up above as a shared resources that multiple people can jump in and use it. That was something that hopefully would be a time saver for the other people who are part of my account and not necessarily this account that I'm working through. And when it does come from the data, yeah, this is where some of our initial setup of Canvas and making Canvas work for us is going to make sense. So I do encourage you, again, to take a look at our other admin sessions, but being able to use terms and using terms rather than setting everything to the default term is going to much better help you work through finding content and information about those content, especially when it goes towards our analytics and to our statistics at the admin side. Terms also are going to lend themselves to the reporting that we see under settings. And we see quite a bit on the reports. When we configure our report, we can do all terms or we can do specific terms, information that's going to be relevant. One thing that you might want to consider tracking over time is to look at your course storage, see how much course storage changes. Hopefully we have people copying courses and adding to those courses year after year, or semester after semester to use better information. And also look at your LTIs. Check out an LTI report to see what's being used and what you might need to be adding at your overall course. And then we get to check our student competency to see what's happening when it comes to scores, outcomes, etc. Again, good information to be able to track. That's paired with learning more about outcomes and setting outcomes in strategic areas, either overall or account-wide. We'll be working through accreditation. There's actually, if you were to go into the Canvas community and you looked up USU and outcomes, there's a great video about outcomes there as a shared resource, but also something that's going to help with rollout. Well, not so much rollout and adoption, but overall admin side, I guess adoption, longer term adoption as an activity or as a key to being able to track information. For those of you who've been through the accreditation process before, you know how messy it really is to try to get everybody to add information. Remember too, with rollout and adoption, to take a look at permissions and make sure to expand on those permissions. All right, so just brief, we've kind of talked about it overall, but this will be a bit of a review. When it comes to shared resources, we can create those shared rubrics, question banks, outcomes, and even grading schemes if we want to try to push towards a universal grading scheme. Don't talk about that as much, as that one seems to be pretty straightforward on what we can do with it. But remember, these shared resources can be placed at multiple levels, whether at the very top in the root account or down lower in the sub accounts. We hope to avoid having outcomes placed at the course level, as those outcomes will not be able to be reported on or pulled reports for the sub account or the root account. And when it comes to analytics, this also makes a sense to understand some of the organization that we want to have in our setup, because there are some information that we definitely want to grab at the root account level, but we might have to have some sub account or might consider sub account specific reports being pulled. For example, a dean might want to pull information for his or her college that's specific to his or her college and not rely on something that's pulled in from the root account to be filtered down to that sub account for that information. And this is also going to make a difference for how we include some or track some of our courses and where courses are placed rather than having that overall mess of courses. It's kind of nice to pare things down or place things in the right accounts. And as stated, reporting does make a difference. We'll be able to report at the root account level and the sub account levels. And we talked a little bit about it. Regina asked about what our announcement maker role is, what our site admin roles are. Those are just stuff that, just to reiterate, those are just items that we made up for different trainings and for different examples, but definitely something that you can place depending on your college and or your department at your institution. Yeah, we're actually big fans of seeing specific permissions based on different sub-accounts. And sub-accounts can actually take on a much broader meaning if we're thinking about delivering sub-accounts in different locations. Maybe we are a statewide institution. We have a couple different time zones in play for different campuses that are all part of a state system. That state system might be part of Canvas overall, and those different campuses might be different sub-accounts. You know, it's nice to be able to have a different sub-account so you can just accommodate those different time zones. I think not necessarily going to be the case in Ohio, but I know that's a case in Indiana where you do have a time zone in the middle of the state. I think you're safe in Minnesota, aren't you? You're firmly central time zone there. All right. Yes. Okay. So, poor example for the people that are here today, but pretend that's the case. All right, and then putting into practice. Remember sub-account structure, and if you want to take a screenshot of this page, go for it. But sub-account structure, think about the shared permissions, shared resources, and building those custom roles. This is kind of a summary, again, of what we've just talked about. The data is coming in from reports, statistics, and analytics, and it's going to be important to understand our structure overall so that we can pull in that information and make it relevant to us. Communication with parents, students, and teachers. It was really going to be communications with students and teachers in higher ed, but if we add that parent component for K-12, we can use Canvas to push out those newsletters, announcements, and alerts, whether we're building announcements at the course level or whether building announcements at the overall account level, where went through and set up the specific groups. And then, yes, professional development and collaborative spaces, building those collaboration documents, building those group spaces from the admin level. We can even build that professional development course with group spaces for those different groups, and making sure that we're providing some ongoing training with that. Now, there is in the Canvas community a group that would probably be useful for some of the rollout and adoption and for getting ideas from institutions that have been in the system for a while. There is a Canvas admin group that you can access. To get there, log into the Canvas community, maybe log in using your username in the Canvas community. Check out that Canvas admin group, which is one of our main groups in the community. Once you get into that group, you can see some of the questions and you can see some nice resources. Look at this, efficiency tips for Canvas admins. And there's even a semester start checklist. So a couple of you are looking at going live here very soon, probably with the start of the summer semester. One thing our support team has mentioned to the training team more than once that they'd like to see people adopting is this document that I just shared, or at least the link to the document about a semester start checklist. This has helped reduce some of the problems that people face when it comes to the rollout. We're talking about the director of and managers of support mentioning this document as a good place to go when it comes to setting up your account information and rolling it out. Stuff that will be a little bit easier as you move along, but it's definitely a good place to start as you work through your pilot period and as you go through that first rollout, that first live semester that's coming up in a matter of weeks. All right, so with that, we're 5 minutes early. So with that, I'm going to move to the exit page. If you have any additional questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat area. We can answer those questions.